Okay, so when you think Viking, I bet you're picturing the horned helmets, the wild-eyed berserkers, right? Well, forget all that for a minute. Yes, the raids were absolutely real, but that was just one tiny part of a much, much bigger story. We're going to look at the Vikings as they truly were incredibly shrewd traders, pioneering explorers, and savvy nation builders whose impacts, well, we still feel it today.
So, how did they get there? Well, our journey starts with what I like to call the perfect storm that created them in the first place. Then, we're going to track their evolution from simple raiders to actual rulers, follow their absolutely astonishing voyages to the far horizons of the known world, and finally, we'll uncover how the Viking Age didn't just end, it completely transformed everything it touched.
All right, let's wind the clock way back. Long before the first longship ever terrified a European coastline, a really unique set of circumstances was brewing up in Scandinavia. It was the perfect storm, and it was about to unleash the Viking Age on an unsuspecting world.
That's the key question, isn't it? See, Viking wasn't really a nationality, it was more like a job description, an occupation. But what drove someone to take up that particular line of work? It wasn't just bloodlust. Nope, it was a very specific recipe of pressure and opportunity that kind of forced them to look beyond their own shores.
It really boils down to three key ingredients. First up, you've got geographic pressure. Scandinavia's landscape. It's harsh. Not great for farming, but it has a ton of coastline, which naturally pushed them to the sea. Second, they perfected their ship technology, and we'll get to that in a second. And third, you have political opportunity. Europe was basically a patchwork of weak, squabbling kingdoms, and ambitious chieftains back home saw a golden chance for land, for wealth, and for glory.
And at the absolute heart of it all was their greatest innovation, the longship. This thing was a technological marvel. It was clinker-built, that just means the whole planks overlapped, which made it both flexible and incredibly strong. It was light enough to be carried over land, yet tough enough for the open ocean. And its shallow draft, well, that was the real secret weapon. It allowed them to sail deep upriver where no one was expecting an attack. This ship wasn't just a boat, it was the engine of the entire Viking Age.
So you've got the perfect ship and all the right motivation. The stage was set. What had been a mix of, local trade and a bit of piracy was about to explode into the period we all know and think of, the Age of Raids.
And you can see the escalation so clearly. It kicks off in 793 with the shocking raid on Lindisfarne Monastery, an easy, wealthy target that sent a tremor of pure fear through Europe. Less than a century later, they're not just hitting isolated islands anymore. A fleet of 120 ships is sailing up the Seine to sack Paris itself. But the true game changer was around 850, when they stopped going home for the winter. Suddenly, the raids weren't just a seasonal problem. They were a permanent, terrifying presence.
But here's the thing about the Vikings. They were adaptable, they were smart, and they soon realized there was way more to be gained than just what they could carry back home in their ships. A fundamental shift was coming, one that would see them transform from temporary plunderers into permanent settlers and rulers.
This whole shift really crystallizes in 865 with the arrival of what the Anglo-Saxons called the Great Heathen Army. This was something completely new. This was not a raiding party. This was a massive invasion force. Their goal wasn't a quick hit and run. It was conquest. They came to stay.
The entire strategy just flipped on its head. Before, it was seasonal plunder, sticking mostly to the coasts. Now, it was a year-round war of conquest, pushing deep inland to seize and settle territory for good. And you know what? It worked. The result was the Danelaw. After a huge battle, a treaty with Alfred the Great of Wessex formally gave them control over a massive part of England. And this wasn't an occupation. It was a total transformation. Thousands of settlers brought their laws, their culture, their language, and they began to fuse them with the existing Anglo-Saxon world.
But the story doesn't stop in England, not even close. The Vikings' ambition was truly global. While some sailed west to England and Ireland, others looked east, and their journeys would lay the foundations of future empires and push the absolute boundaries of the known world.
While some sailed west, others, who became known as the Varangians, looked east. They navigated the massive river systems of what is now Russia and Ukraine, creating this incredible superhighway of trade from the Baltic all the way down to the rich empires of Constantinople and Baghdad. They didn't just trade either. They assimilated with local Slavic tribes, founded the state of the Kievan Rus, and they were so respected as warriors that they became the elite personal bodyguards to the Byzantine emperor himself, the famous Varangian Guard. And at the same time, others were pushing west, not for plunder this time, but for land. They took on the brutal, open waters of the North Atlantic, island hopping from Scandinavia to settle Iceland, and then on to Greenland under Eric the Red. And from that icy outpost, his son, Leif Erikson, would make the final, incredible leap into the complete unknown.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 500 years. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson's crew landed and actually built a settlement in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. They were the first Europeans in North America, a full half a millennium before Columbus. And while that small outpost didn't survive in the long run, the achievement itself is just a staggering testament to their skill and their sheer audacity as sailors.
So, all great ages have to come to an end. But the end of the Viking Age wasn't some sudden collapse or a single decisive defeat. It was much more of a gradual transformation. As the Vikings and the world they had changed, well, they changed each other in return. This all comes to a chaotic head in one pivotal year, 1066. The English king dies without an heir, and 3 men all want the throne. You've got an English earl, the king of Norway, Harold Hardrade, and William, the Duke of Normandy. And here's the incredible irony. The English army marches north and defeats the last great Viking invasion at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. But just weeks later, exhausted and depleted, they march south and are defeated at the Battle of Hastings by the Normans, who were themselves the descendants of Vikings who had settled in France. How crazy is that? The Viking Age was ended, in a way, by other Vikings. So ultimately, the Vikings didn't just vanish. They just became, well, everyone else. They became the Normans in France, the Norse Gaels in Ireland, the Rus in the East. They didn't really lose, they assimilated. As their homelands became stable Christian kingdoms, the very need for that Viking job description just faded away. They had successfully integrated themselves into the new world they had helped create. Which leaves us with a really fascinating final question, doesn't it? If the Vikings weren't really defeated but simply became a fundamental part of the nations they helped forge, did their age ever truly end? Or did it just evolve into the world that we live in now? Their echo is literally everywhere. It's in the English we speak. Words like sky, egg, take, and window are all direct imports from Old Norse. It's in the place names on our maps. They are the founders of nations and the ancestors of kings. The Viking Age as a distinct period may be over, but its legacy isn't just history. It is written into the cultural, linguistic, and even the genetic DNA of the modern world.